The crash landing. The massive explosion rocked the ISS Intrepid like a cosmic hammer striking an anvil. Chief Engineer Nathan Cole grabbed the nearest console as artificial gravity fluctuated, sending tools floating in graceful arcs across engineering. Warning klaxons screamed through the corridors, their urgent wail mixing with the hiss of ruptured pressure seals. Status report. Commander Richard's voice crackled over the intercom, steady despite the chaos. Nathan's fingers flew across the holographic interface, scanning damage reports. Main engines critically damaged, sir. We've lost primary propulsion and... Another explosion cut him off, smaller but no less concerning. Power grids destabilizing. We need emergency protocols now. A cool, melodic voice cut through the chaos. Your assessment is incomplete, Engineer Cole. Nathan turned to see Vesera gliding toward his station, her crystalline skin catching the emergency lighting in hypnotic patterns. The Xerillian engineer moved with characteristic grace, each step precise and measured. Her luminescent eyes fixed on his console with laser focus. The power grid destabilization follows a geometric progression, she continued. By my calculations, we have exactly 8.3 minutes before total system failure. Then we'd better work fast, Nathan growled, already rerouting power through secondary systems. He'd worked with Xerillians before, brilliant engineers, but their obsession with precision often got in the way of quick solutions. Vesera's bioluminescent patterns flickered in what Nathan had learned was disapproval. Your proposed solution violates 13 safety protocols. And your protocols will get us killed in about. He made a show of checking his watch. 7.9 minutes now. Before their argument could escalate, Commander Richard's voice returned. Engineering, we're implementing emergency protocols. All non-essential personnel are being evacuated to escape pods. Sir, Nathan interrupted, if we can stabilize the power grid. Negative. Ship's AI predicts structural failure in multiple sections. We're abandoning ship. A pause. You two are our best engineers. Get to escape pod 17 and figure out how to save what's left of my ship after we're clear. Nathan met Vesera's gaze. Her crystalline features were set in their usual mask of cool professionalism, but he caught the slight pulse of anxiety in her bioluminescence. Let's move, he said, already heading for the exit. Unless you'd prefer to calculate our exact odds of survival. To his surprise, she fell into step beside him, matching his pace. The odds are approximately 32.7%, accounting for current ship status, distance to the escape pod, and... She stumbled as another explosion rocked the ship. Nathan caught her arm instinctively, noting how her skin felt like smooth, cool glass beneath his fingers. Make that 31.2%, she amended, quickly straightening but not immediately pulling away from his grip. They raced through corridors filled with evacuating crew members, the ship groaning around them. Nathan's mind raced through possibilities, already planning how to stabilize the Intrepid once they were safely away. The trick would be convincing Vesera to bend those precious protocols of hers. They reached escape pod 17 with minutes to spare. As Nathan keyed in the access code, Vesera spoke softly beside him. Engineer Cole. Nathan. There's something you should know. He turned, surprised by her use of his first name. Her bioluminescent patterns were pulsing rapidly now, creating mesmerizing waves across her crystalline skin. Due to pod space limitations and life support calculations, we will be required to share extremely close quarters during our escape and subsequent rescue period. The pod door slid open, revealing a space barely large enough for two people. Nathan couldn't help but grin despite their dire situation. Well, look at that. Seems the universe has a sense of humor after all. I fail to see the humor in our predicament, Vesera replied, but Nathan caught the slight brightening of her luminescence that he'd learned meant she was fighting amusement. As they strapped in and initiated launch sequences, Nathan wondered if surviving the ship's destruction would end up being easier than surviving forced proximity with the most frustratingly precise engineer he'd ever met. At least she was easy on the eyes, even if every other word out of her mouth was about protocols and regulations. The pod ejected with a violent shudder, and through the viewport, they watched their home of the past year begin to break apart. Nathan felt Vesera tense beside him, her shoulder pressing against his in the cramped space. "For what it's worth," he said softly, "I calculate our odds of making this work at exactly 100%. She turned to him, luminescent eyes wide. "That is statistically impossible. That's what makes us humans so interesting." He winked. "We excel at impossible things." Shared quarters, divided hearts. In the cramped escape pod, Nathan fought to maintain his composure as Vesera's crystalline form pressed against him during their descent toward the nearest outpost. The life support systems hummed softly, barely masking his accelerated heartbeat. "Your vital signs indicate distress," Vesera observed, her luminescent patterns shifting in concern. "Perhaps if I adjusted my position." "I'm fine," Nathan replied quickly, too aware of how her attempt to move only brought them closer together. "Just focusing on our trajectory." The outpost came into view through the viewport, Starbase 47, a sprawling structure of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields. As they approached, Commander Richards' voice crackled through the comm system. "All escape pods accounted for. Prepare for emergency docking procedures. And, there's something else. Due to recent diplomatic incidents, all personnel will be assigned shared quarters with someone from a different species. No exceptions." Nathan glanced at Vesera, catching the rapid flicker of her bioluminescence that indicated surprise. "Looks like we'll be roommates for a while longer." "That would be highly irregular," she responded, but he noticed she didn't sound entirely displeased. Their pod docked with a gentle shudder, and they made their way through processing. The quarters assignment officer, a gruff Andorian named Commander Thex, barely looked up from his console. "Cole and Vesera, room 2187. Single bed unit due to space constraints. Make it work." The room was tiny, barely large enough for the narrow bed and a small workstation. Vesera stood in the doorway, her crystalline features unreadable. "This violates at least 7 separate regulations regarding personal space requirements." Nathan dropped his duffel on the floor. "Look on the bright side, at least we'll have plenty of time to figure out how to save the Intrepid." As if on cue, their tablets chimed with a message from Commander Richards. The ship's AI had managed to stabilize some systems, but major repairs would be needed. They had 2 weeks to devise a solution. "We should begin immediately," Vesera said, moving to the workstation. Her proximity sent a wave of subtle energy through the air, making Nathan's skin tingle. They worked through the night, arguing over approaches and solutions. Nathan couldn't help but notice how Vesera's luminescence brightened whenever he challenged her calculations, or how her crystal-like fingers lingered when pointing out flaws in his designs. By the time exhaustion forced them to rest, they faced the awkward reality of the single bed. "I can take the floor," Nathan offered, though the metal deck plates looked far from comfortable. "That would be inefficient," Vesera replied. "Xerillians require physical proximity for optimal rest cycles. We share energy." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "Merely a practical solution," she said, but her increased luminescence betrayed her nervousness. As they settled onto the narrow bed, Nathan felt the subtle vibration of her energy field washing over him. It was oddly soothing, like being immersed in warm starlight. "Your heart rate is elevated again," she murmured. "Maybe I'm just enjoying the company," he replied softly, feeling her crystalline form relax against him. "That would be most unprofessional," she whispered, but made no move to pull away. As sleep claimed them, Nathan realized that saving the Intrepid might not be the biggest challenge they faced. The real test would be maintaining professional boundaries when every atom in his body seemed drawn to her like a planet to its star. In the darkness, Vesera's bioluminescence pulsed in harmony with his heartbeat, creating patterns that spoke of possibilities neither of them dared to voice yet. Breaking protocol. The emergency sirens blared through Starbase 47, jolting Nathan and Vesera awake. Their limbs were tangled together, her crystalline form pulsing with alarmed bioluminescence. Station's reactor core is destabilizing, Nathan read from the flashing console. Containment fields failing. Impossible, Vesera's fingers danced across the workstation. The safety protocols. Sometimes protocols fail, Nathan grabbed his toolkit. We need to get down there. Racing through corridors filled with panicking crew members, they reached the reactor level. Chief Engineer Dravix, a towering Andorian, blocked their path. Radiation levels too high, he growled. Nobody goes in. Nathan stepped forward. With respect, sir, that reactor goes, we all die. I have experience with unstable cores. And I possess natural radiation resistance, Vesera added, her patterns glowing intensely. Inside the reactor chamber, emergency lights cast an eerie red glow. Nathan's radiation meter screamed warnings as they approached the core. The containment field generator is failing, Vesera analyzed. We have approximately 7 minutes before catastrophic failure. Nathan was already pulling panels open. I can bypass the main circuits, but I'll need your help. It'll mean breaking about 20 protocols. To his surprise, Vesera didn't hesitate. Tell me what you need. Working in perfect sync, they rerouted power, crossed circuits that were never meant to meet. Nathan's hands were steady even as radiation burns began forming on his exposed skin. Nathan, Vesera's voice held an emotion he'd never heard from her before, fear. Your radiation exposure is reaching critical levels. Almost, got it, he grunted, making the final connection. The core's angry red glow subsided, containment field stabilizing. Nathan stumbled, radiation sickness hitting hard. Vesera caught him, cradling his larger frame against her crystalline body. Her touch felt like cool starlight on his burning skin. You need medical attention immediately, she said, but Nathan caught something else in her voice, admiration. Worth it, he managed a weak smile. We did good work today. In the med bay, as doctors worked to treat his radiation exposure, Vesera never left his side. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. You violated 93 separate safety protocols, she said softly. Guilty as charged. Nathan reached for her hand, watching as their fingers intertwined. But we saved everyone. Yes, she whispered, her crystalline features softening. Sometimes, protocols must yield to necessity. As healing nanites coursed through his system, Nathan realized something had fundamentally shifted between them. In that reactor room, they'd broken more than just safety protocols. Melting barriers. Inside their shared quarters, Nathan watched Vesera's crystalline form shimmer in the starlight streaming through their viewport. 2 weeks had passed since the reactor incident, and his recovery was nearly complete, though the doctors insisted he remain on light duty. Your vital signs have improved significantly, Vesera noted, her fingers tracing the fading radiation marks on his arm. The casual intimacy of her touch sent pleasant shivers through him. Thanks to my dedicated nurse, he teased, enjoying how her bioluminescence brightened in response. These days, he found himself deliberately trying to provoke those beautiful light patterns. I merely ensured proper medical protocols were followed, she replied, but didn't withdraw her hand. Their workstation beeped with an incoming transmission from Commander Richards. The Intrepid's repairs were proceeding, but new complications had arisen. The ship's quantum matrix had destabilized, threatening to tear the vessel apart at a molecular level. This is unprecedented, Vesera's patterns pulsed with concern as she analyzed the data. Standard procedures won't be sufficient. Nathan moved behind her, close enough to feel the energy field that always surrounded her. Then we'll have to get creative. What if we reversed the polarity of the quantum field? That would violate every known principle of quantum mechanics, she protested, but he noticed her patterns shifting to what he now recognized as excitement. Exactly. Sometimes the impossible is exactly what we need. His hands covered hers on the console, guiding her through his calculations. She didn't pull away. As they worked, the space between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. Every brush of skin against crystal, every shared glance, carried deeper meaning. Nathan found himself studying her features, the elegant angles of her face, the way her luminescence created ever-changing patterns across her form. "You're staring again," she observed softly. "Can't help it. You're beautiful when you're breaking physics." Her patterns flared brilliantly. "Such observations are highly unprofessional." "I crossed that line weeks ago," he admitted. "Probably around the time I realized I couldn't sleep without your energy field anymore." Vesera turned to face him, their bodies inches apart. "That is a dangerous admission, Nathan Cole." "I'm getting good at dangerous things." He reached up, tracing the crystalline contours of her cheek. "Tell me you don't feel this too." Her luminescence pulsed rapidly. "Zerillians do not, we are not supposed to." "More protocols." He smiled gently. "We're good at breaking those." "This is different," she whispered, but leaned into his touch. "My people believe emotional attachments compromise logical judgment." "And what do you believe?" Instead of answering, she pressed her crystalline lips to his. The contact sent waves of energy coursing through him, like being kissed by starlight itself. Her natural luminescence brightened until their quarters glowed like a newborn star. When they finally parted, her patterns were creating entirely new configurations he'd never seen before. "That was highly irregular," he suggested, drawing her closer. "Fascinating," she corrected, running crystalline fingers through his hair. "Though it requires further study." Their second kiss was interrupted by another alert from their workstation. The Intrepid's quantum matrix was reaching critical levels. "We should." Vesera gestured at the console, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "Save the ship." Nathan pressed his forehead to hers. "Or continue our research." "Perhaps both." Her eyes sparkled with uncharacteristic mischief. "I find I'm capable of impressive multitasking when properly motivated." They worked through the night, developing their unconventional solution between increasingly frequent research breaks. By morning, they had both a viable plan to save the Intrepid and several new entries in Vesera's personal log about human-Zerillian compatibility. "You realize this changes everything," she said as they finally prepared for sleep, her crystalline form fitted perfectly against his. "I'm counting on it," he replied, tracing the luminescent patterns across her skin. "Though I have to ask, what happened to all those protocols about emotional attachment?" She propped herself up on one elbow, regarding him with glowing eyes. "I have learned that some things transcend protocols. You humans have a curious way of making the impossible seem inevitable. That's what makes us charming," he yawned, pulling her closer. "Indeed," she murmured, her energy field enveloping him like a blanket of stars. "Though I suspect you are a particularly dangerous example of your species. Guilty as charged." He was drifting off, lulled by the harmonic pulse of her bioluminescence. "But you love me anyway." Her patterns flared brilliantly at his words, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she pressed closer, synchronizing her energy field with his heartbeat in a gesture that said more than words ever could. Tomorrow they would face the challenge of saving the Intrepid, of explaining their relationship to their superiors, of bridging the gap between their very different worlds. But for now, they had created their own universe in this tiny room, where protocols meant nothing and impossible things happened every time they touched. The final test. The day of reckoning arrived with the subtlety of a supernova. Nathan and Vesera stood in the Intrepid's newly reconstructed engineering bay, preparing to implement their controversial quantum matrix solution. "All personnel, this is Commander Richards." We're initiating the quantum field reversal in 5 minutes. If this doesn't work. The commander's voice trailed off meaningfully. Nathan squeezed Vesera's crystalline hand, feeling the excited pulse of her energy field. Having second thoughts about breaking every law of physics? Merely calculating the probability of success, she replied, her patterns creating complex geometric shapes that reflected her focus. Though I find my usual mathematical precision is compromised when you're near. Good, he grinned, pulling her into a quick kiss that sent sparkles of light cascading across her form. Sometimes a little chaos is exactly what we need. The ship's AI began the countdown. They moved to their stations, working in perfect synchronization. As their plan unfolded, Nathan couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come, from reluctant roommates to something that defied all protocols and expectations. Quantum field destabilizing, the AI announced. Matrix collapse imminent. Now. Nathan initiated the reversal sequence while Vesera modulated the power flow. The ship groaned around them as fundamental forces were twisted in ways they were never meant to go. Warning lights flashed across every console. Multiple system failures detected. Hull integrity compromising. Quantum cascade imminent. Stay with me, Nathan called out, his hands flying across the controls. Just a few more seconds. Vesera's voice was steady despite the chaos. Energy patterns are shifting. The matrix is. Nathan, look. On their displays, the quantum field was reorganizing itself into an entirely new configuration, one that shouldn't have been possible according to every textbook ever written. It's beautiful, Vesera whispered, her luminescence pulsing in harmony with the new quantum patterns. We've created something entirely new. The ship's trembling subsided. One by one, the warning lights winked out. Commander Richard's voice came over the comm, thick with relief. Whatever you two did down there, it worked. The Intrepid is stable, more than stable. We're reading efficiency levels 300% above normal. Nathan pulled Vesera into an embrace, not caring who saw. We did it. We broke approximately 1,547 protocols to achieve it, she noted, but her patterns were creating joyous symphonies of light. Worth it? Her answer was to kiss him deeply, sending waves of energy coursing through them both. When they finally parted, the entire engineering crew was staring, some shocked, others grinning knowingly. Commander Richards cleared her throat from the doorway. If you two are finished rewriting physics and interspecies relations protocols, I believe we have some paperwork to discuss. Hours later, in their quarters, officially shared now, with all proper forms filed in triplicate, Nathan watched Vesera recording their breakthrough for the engineering archives. You know, he said thoughtfully, we never did figure out who assigned us as roommates in that escape pod. Her patterns flickered with amusement. Actually, I may have altered the pod assignments when the evacuation order came through. Nathan sat up in surprise. You? Breaking protocols before you even knew me? I had observed your unorthodox but effective methods for several months, she admitted, her luminescence betraying slight embarrassment. I found myself curious. Curious enough to orchestrate our entire relationship. She moved to sit beside him, her crystal form catching the starlight. I calculated a 67.3% chance that prolonged proximity would either result in mutual homicide or this. He pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. The probability of this specific outcome was actually only 2.4%, she murmured against his neck. You have a habit of defying statistical analysis. It's a gift. He traced the patterns of light across her skin. So what's the probability of a human Zerillian wedding being approved by the Admiralty? Her luminescence flared brilliantly. That would violate approximately 2,849 regulations. Perfect, he grinned. Those are my favorite kind to break. As they sealed this new commitment with a kiss, their quarters blazing with the light of her joy, Nathan reflected that some protocols were meant to be broken. Sometimes the most beautiful things in the universe came from breaking all the rules and letting your heart guide the way. In the vast expanse of space, aboard a ship that now ran on impossible physics, a human and a Xyrillian had discovered that love, like quantum mechanics, didn't always follow the expected equations. And that was exactly what made it miraculous. For the record, Vessera whispered later, her crystalline form draped across him, I calculate our long-term compatibility at exactly 100%. I thought you said that was statistically impossible, he teased. Her patterns created the equivalent of a Xyrillian smile. I'm learning to appreciate impossible things. Outside their viewport, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if celebrating this union of chaos and order, of human spontaneity and Xyrillian precision. They had saved their ship by breaking every rule in the book, but more importantly, they had found something worth breaking all the rules for.